The afternoon sky hung low over the quiet suburb, its pale light spilling softly across the narrow streets. When Elena stepped out of the cab and looked up at her mother's house, it felt both familiar and foreign. The same white shutters, the same roses in the yard, only now, the air around it seemed heavier, as if time itself had settled there and refused to move on. She hadn't been home in 3 years. Linda opened the door with her usual composed smile. "You made it just in time for dinner," she said, as if reading from a script. Elena managed a nod, her suitcase dragging slightly behind her. Behind her mother, Richard appeared, taller, quieter, his face carrying the same calm expression she remembered from childhood. "Welcome home, kiddo," he said gently. The warmth in his tone caught her off guard. For a moment, she almost felt safe again. Inside, the house looked spotless, almost unnaturally so. Everything in its place. The tick of the clock on the living room wall seemed louder than usual. Linda moved about the kitchen briskly, commenting on trivial things: Elena's hair, her shoes, the traffic. It was easier to talk about anything than what actually mattered. Dinner was polite but distant. Elena spoke about her work at a community arts program abroad, about her new friends, about how the city life felt freeing. Linda smiled stiffly but said little. Richard listened carefully, occasionally asking small, thoughtful questions. "Do you still paint?" he asked. She nodded, noticing how his eyes softened when he spoke to her, different from the sharp tone her mother often carried. After dinner, Linda retreated upstairs to prepare for a weekend business trip. The sound of her heels faded into silence. Richard and Elena remained in the dining room, the air between them thick with things neither knew how to name. "It's strange, isn't it?" Richard finally said, looking at her with a hint of nostalgia. "The house feels quieter every year." "It feels colder too," she replied. "Like everyone just learned to live around the silence." He chuckled softly. "That's one way to put it." Elena studied him for a moment. He looked older, the faint lines at the corners of his eyes telling silent stories of worry and fatigue. Yet there was a calm dignity in him, the kind that came from years of keeping things unspoken. When her father had left years ago, it was Richard who had helped her through the long nights of confusion. He never tried to replace her father, he just listened. That quiet understanding had meant everything. Later that evening, Elena wandered into her old bedroom. The posters were gone, replaced with neatly folded linens and an empty desk. Her mother had turned it into a guest room. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the pale walls, and thought about how easily people erase the past when it becomes inconvenient. Downstairs, she heard Richard moving around the living room, probably turning off the lights. She hesitated, then walked down the stairs. "Do you ever regret marrying her?" she asked suddenly. Her voice surprised even herself. Richard paused, his hand on the light switch. "That's a heavy question," he said, then looked at her, his eyes tired but kind. "No. Not regret. Maybe, disappointment. People change, and sometimes they stop hearing each other. That's all." Elena leaned against the doorframe. "She never really understood me," she said quietly. "When I told her I was gay, she didn't even look at me. Just changed the subject. Like I'd said something embarrassing." Richard sighed. "Your mother struggles with things she can't control. It doesn't mean she doesn't care. But you're brave, Elena. You didn't let her silence become yours." The word struck her deeply. For the first time in a long while, she felt seen. Outside, a breeze rattled the windows. The clock ticked softly, marking a moment that neither of them knew would linger. "Linda's leaving tomorrow," Richard said after a pause. "You'll have the house to yourself for a few days. Might help you settle back in." She smiled faintly. "You mean we'll have the house to ourselves?" His expression flickered, something unreadable, gone before she could name it. "Right," he said simply. They stood there for a long moment, the silence growing warm, not awkward. When he finally turned toward the stairs, he placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You're stronger than you think, Elena," he said, his voice low but sincere. As he walked away, Elena remained still, her pulse echoing faintly in her ears. That simple touch carried more emotion than any embrace she'd known. It wasn't desire, it was understanding, a dangerous kind of closeness born out of loneliness and unspoken care. When she finally went to bed, the house felt even quieter. The sound of the clock downstairs seemed to pulse with her thoughts, steady and relentless. She didn't know what the coming days would bring, but she sensed something shifting, something that couldn't be undone. The night settled, and the house of silence listened. Rain began tapping softly against the windows just after sunset, a delicate rhythm that echoed through the empty house. Linda had left that morning, her usual perfume fading from the hallway like a memory already trying to forget itself. By nightfall, only 2 lights remained on, one in the living room, the other in the kitchen, casting long, uneven shadows across the quiet rooms. Elena sat curled on the sofa, sketchbook open but untouched. The sound of rain had always comforted her, but tonight it carried something else, an undercurrent of anticipation she couldn't quite name. Richard entered the room, a mug of tea in each hand. "You still take honey, right?" he asked. She looked up, startled for a moment, then smiled faintly. "You remember." He handed her the cup and sat across from her, the dim light outlining the tired contours of his face. "Hard to forget small things," he said. "Sometimes they're the only things that stay." The silence between them wasn't awkward anymore. It felt deliberate, almost fragile, as though one wrong word might shatter it completely. Elena sipped her tea, her eyes drifting to the framed family photos on the wall. In most of them, she looked like a visitor, someone standing just outside belonging. "Do you ever feel like you're living in someone else's story?" she asked suddenly. Richard's brow furrowed slightly. "Every day," he admitted. "I thought marriage would give my life meaning, but sometimes it just gives you quieter rooms to think in." His honesty surprised her. It wasn't the kind of answer adults usually gave. "You and Mom, are you happy?" He let out a soft, humorless laugh. "Happiness isn't something we talk about much anymore. We just coexist. It's easier that way." Elena studied him carefully. His voice carried the weariness of someone who had loved too carefully for too long. She thought about how her mother avoided emotions, how she herself had inherited that silence until she learned to break it. "You always made things feel lighter," she said softly. "When I was younger, it was like you could hear me even when I didn't speak." Richard's expression softened. "That's because I saw you, Elena. I saw how hard you tried to fit into spaces that weren't built for you." The rain grew heavier outside, a low rumble of thunder rolling through the night. The power flickered, then vanished. Only the faint orange glow of the fireplace remained, painting the room in trembling light. "Well," Richard said, half smiling, "guess it's just us and the storm now." Elena laughed quietly. "I've missed nights like this. Simple. Real." He poured them both a little wine, something he rarely did, and they sat near the fire, the flames dancing between them. For a while, neither spoke. Then Richard broke the silence. "Can I tell you something I've never said aloud?" She nodded. "I envy your courage," he said. "The way you live without apology. I've spent most of my life keeping peace, avoiding truth. But you," he paused, searching for words, "you fight for who you are, even when it hurts." His words disarmed her. She hadn't expected vulnerability from him, not like this. "I fight because I have to," she murmured. "But some days I wish I could stop being brave and just be." Their eyes met, steady, uncertain. The fire crackled softly. In that moment, neither of them were stepfather and stepdaughter. They were two people, weary of pretending, both aching to be understood. "I've always wanted to protect you," Richard said, his voice low. "But sometimes I wonder if you were the one protecting me." Elena felt something shift inside her. It wasn't attraction, not in the usual sense. It was a strange mixture of love, sadness, and recognition, a mirror held between two lonely souls. She set down her cup, her hands trembling slightly. Maybe we both needed saving, she whispered. Outside, lightning flashed. The brief illumination revealed tears in Richard's eyes before he looked away. You remind me what it means to feel again, he confessed. The air between them thickened, not with tension, but with truth, raw and unguarded. Hours passed like minutes. They spoke about fear, about choices, about how easy it is to lose yourself in silence. Elena admitted she'd always felt invisible, even in her own home. Richard told her how marriage had turned into an arrangement he didn't know how to leave without breaking everything. When the rain finally eased, dawn was beginning to paint the sky in shades of gray. The storm had passed, but something irreversible had shifted. Elena stood to leave, pausing at the doorway. Tonight was different, she said quietly. I think we finally stopped pretending. Richard nodded slowly. Yes, he whispered. And that's what frightens me. As she climbed the stairs, the first light of morning slipped through the windows, washing over the quiet house. She didn't look back, but she felt the weight of his gaze, a shared understanding neither could ever speak of again. The night of truths had ended, but its echo would remain. The morning light slipped through the blinds, casting pale stripes across the apartment walls. Ethan lay awake, staring at the ceiling, his body still beside Michael's but his mind far away. The kiss from the night before replayed endlessly, each memory sharp with both exhilaration and shame. He hadn't slept, turning over again and again the same question: what did it mean, and what would he do now? Michael stirred next to him, stretching before pressing a soft kiss against Ethan's shoulder. You were quiet last night, he murmured. Everything okay? Ethan forced a nod. Just tired. Long day. It was a lie, and he knew it. Michael accepted the explanation without hesitation, as he always did, his trust unwavering. That trust felt heavier than any accusation could. Later that morning, while Michael busied himself with errands, Ethan sat at the kitchen table, phone in hand. A new message glowed on the screen. Last night wasn't a mistake. Don't pretend it didn't mean something. The words from Daniel sent a shiver through him. His thumb hovered over the keyboard, torn between deleting the message and answering it. In the end, he did neither. He simply locked the phone and shoved it face down on the table, as though hiding it could erase the truth it carried. Days passed, but the distance between Ethan and Michael grew impossible to ignore. Michael asked questions, small ones at first. Are you stressed at work? Did something happen with your family? Ethan brushed them aside, always with the same refrain: I'm fine, just tired. But Michael's eyes lingered on him longer now, suspicion flickering at the edges of his usual warmth. Daniel, meanwhile, refused to fade into silence. Another message came. Then another. Sometimes playful, sometimes pointed, but always reminding Ethan of the current running between them. Each vibration of his phone was a reminder of the boundary he had already crossed and the pull of what might follow. Eventually, Ethan agreed to meet him again. He told himself it was just a talk, to clear the air, but deep down he knew he was lying. The second meeting came easily, too easily. Daniel's presence was intoxicating, his laughter sparking the same restless energy Ethan had been craving. One meeting became two, and then more, each time leaving Ethan with a heavier conscience and a sharper ache of guilt. At home, Michael's gestures of care began to cut in unexpected ways. The way he made Ethan tea without asking. The way he reached for his hand while watching television. The way he leaned his head on Ethan's shoulder, trusting, unguarded. Every act of kindness was a mirror reflecting Ethan's betrayal, forcing him to confront the widening rift between who he wanted to be and who he was becoming. One evening, Michael cooked Ethan's favorite meal. The effort was obvious: candles lit, the table carefully set, soft music playing in the background. Ethan sat across from him, heart heavy, the meal tasting of ash despite the care put into it. Are you happy? Michael asked suddenly, his voice quiet but steady. The question struck harder than any accusation. Ethan opened his mouth, but the words tangled in his throat. He wanted to say yes, to reassure Michael, to hold on to the stability they had built. But another part of him, restless and guilty, whispered no. He forced a smile, swallowing the truth. Of course I am. Michael studied him for a moment, then nodded, choosing, at least for now, to believe the answer. That night, while Michael drifted into sleep beside him, Ethan sat at the edge of the bed, phone in hand again. A new message from Daniel glowed on the screen. You can't keep pretending. You know where you belong. Ethan didn't reply. He didn't delete it either. He simply stared, torn between the life he had built with Michael and the fire Daniel represented. The screen dimmed, plunging the room into darkness, but the weight of the choice remained. Ethan lay back down, his arm draped around Michael as though nothing had changed. Yet inside, he knew everything had. He closed his eyes, caught in the silence of the night, aware that his double life was unsustainable. But for now, he remained in the in-between, neither confessing nor committing, trapped in a quiet betrayal that grew heavier with every passing day. And as the city outside settled into sleep, Ethan realized he wasn't sure how long he could keep carrying the secret, or how long it would be before it carried him to ruin.